So people's conception of what an expert is always relative to what you know. You know, many people look at those around them, they'll compare themselves to a professional writer, they'll compare themselves to a professional video producer or organizer or whatever it is, and then they will say, I can never get that level of skill. That person must be naturally talented. And I think this is a complete misconception of how people get skill, how people gain talent in different areas. There is obviously some degree of natural talent that comes in with certain things, but I think it really comes down to work ethic. You know, a few times people have said to me, oh, you're such a good organizer or something like that. I don't think of myself as a good organizer. I think of myself as somebody who's just barely getting their toes wet, basically, after 10 years of doing this. You know, I feel like maybe give me another 20, 30, 40 years, maybe then I'll consider myself a good organizer, maybe, if I'm able to achieve some things, right? There's that relative scope. So people look at that and they say, this person has 10 years more experience than I do, so they're an expert, relatively speaking. And I get this too when it comes to wild foods and identification of wild edible plants and mushrooms and wildlife and hunting and these different things. I'm not a total expert by any means, but compared to a lot of people in this culture, I do have a lot. So you can always learn from somebody who has the next level of experience up from you. But I think it really just comes down to like years on the grind. You know, I can go out in the woods and I can say, okay, here's a chanterelle, here's oyster, lobster, hedgehog, yellowfoot, all these different species, and people will say, wow, this must have come to you so easy, but that stuff doesn't come easy. You study for years, you go out with people who know what they're doing, you put in the work, right? You do the grind of the daily work, and you stick with it over years and years and years and years. And I think this is the difference. Some people, they want a quick return on investment. They want a very fast experience. They want to just become an expert like that. That's not the reality. That's not how things work. I actually got a good grounding in this in some ways because, for example, I always sucked at sports. Terrible. I was so slow. I was the worst kid on my soccer team. I had no interest in any of those things, and I didn't apply myself. Then I got interested in a few outdoor sports, and I started applying myself, and I was terrible because I wasn't strong. My body didn't know how to move well. I had that legacy of 10, 15 years of moving poorly behind me. It's still going. I'm still gaining athletic confidence in my own body, learning how to move, learning how to, flex my spine in all these different positions and develop muscles that, I wasn't aware of. My nervous system hadn't built a relationship with this part of my body. I have to put in the work, in other words. So in terms of organizing, I put this out there as a lesson for organizers, because I think it is very important that we acknowledge that there are no shortcuts. There is no substitute for doing the actual hard work, doing the daily grind, weekly, monthly, yearly, to build relationships, build experience, get a catalog of the different issues and the different philosophies that are out there, learn how to think critically, develop strategic thinking. Just like in a movement practice in, martial arts or something like that, you have the actual forms that you're going to go through, but then you have the smallest details, right? Like a master may look at somebody and say, they're not doing this quite right. Their foot isn't turned the right direction, right? Their hip is cocked at a strange angle. They're losing power out of this, this slight inward rotation they've got in their knee. Whereas somebody who doesn't know what they're doing would say they're doing it perfect. But again, it's that relative level of experience. There's always somewhere else to go. There's always more to learn. This balance between the attention to detail and the big picture. Right? So in organizing, you need a big picture, you need strategic thinking, you need planning, you need, to think on the scale of campaigns and sort of into the mid-level stuff like that. But you also need the smallest attention to detail. You can't organize effectively if, when you write, when you try and communicate in certain ways through writing or email or phone calls or whatever, you're sloppy. Right? That's energy lost. Just like the knee that's turned in, you are bleeding energy when you don't have the attention to detail in these different areas. And I say that self-critically because I'm sure there are many areas in which I am bleeding energy. That's how we learn, is we find these things, somebody points them out to us, and then we start to change that pattern. We start to build a new movement pattern or new organizing pattern, new communication pattern. I hope this is helpful to people. I think it's incredibly important to stick with it. And I have seen many people over the years get frustrated with a lack of progress, get frustrated with themselves and their seeming inability to get over a certain hump. But your intelligence, your mind, your body is internalizing lessons in that period. And if you keep applying yourself, if you keep on that grind and you keep going again and again and again and again, critically, not just throwing yourself at whatever activity you're doing, but applying yourself critically and analyzing yourself, seeking outside input, learning from other people, trying to do some diverse things, sidestepping problems that you may encounter rather than just going headlong into them, then you will overcome that plateau eventually. I find that, my experiences in different physical disciplines comes over very clearly into my organizing work, into my writing work, into my political work, because it's a similar approach as an actual discipline, not as a hobby, not as something you just do for fun to have a good time, right? But if you approach it as a discipline and you're actually interested in progression and becoming better, not necessarily for any ego reasons or anything like that, but for yourself, I get a lot of satisfaction out of those things. In that sense, the process itself is what's important. Developing that love of learning, that love of the discipline itself, I think is critical as much in organizing, in political work, as it is in, a martial art, as it is in any other type of physical discipline you can imagine.